Yep, yep. Yeah. Yeah, I can feel that. I can feel that groove. Yeah, that's funky. Yeah. Let's check the internet connection, yeah. Make sure that's good. Really, I should do that before I start streaming, but I can't tell on my connection without being in OBS first. Sodium and sugar water, very good. 8% of your total carbohydrates, 45% of your added sugars. 90 calories per serving. Very good. Yeah, very good. Very, very, very good. We'll get started here in a little bit. Give me a few seconds here to make sure everything's going okay. I gotta make sure I have the right microphone everywhere, right? It's something stupid, but I have to make sure that I am using the right microphone. Gain is correct, very good. Can you give me the properties, please? Thank you, very good. Very good. Yeah, alright, let's get into this. We're not gonna be announcing this on Twitter or anything, no. Hey there, hi there, Hyde here. And I am still very sick. But that's okay, we're gonna make it work, right? Lucky spin, we have a gacha here. What do we get? We get money! A lot of money. That's great. I don't think we actually need money. But it's nice to have money, you know? Just like in real life. Having money is good. Do we have anything on sale here that we could possibly buy? Probably not, if I had to guess. What would we actually want? Would we want a bigger net? Maybe we'd want a bigger net. No, we don't want to do fishing tasks. So, hey there, hi there, Hyde here. Still very sick, recovering from who knows what I have. I'm pretty sure it's COVID. Let's just buy the bigger net, yeah. Be done with that. Very good, now we don't have any money. We'll go, to the river. No, to the river, thank you. So, I've been having a week. Honestly, I've been having more than a week. It's been a couple months, really. Let's see if we can still play this game. I really don't even know what to say. There we go. I've been playing a bit of Skyward Sword. I've been playing a little bit of Rogue Legacy here and there, whenever possible. But I really haven't been playing much of anything at all. I've been mostly just, you know, doing the corporate slave kind of thing and working in my free time. Yeah, so it's nice to be here. It's nice to be able to stream like this, I guess. It's kind of a little bit of escapism, right? Yeah. And I really do enjoy playing video games. It's one of the few joys I have left in life, being the old man that I am. Especially being the sick old man that I am, right? How long have I been suffering from tendinitis? It's gotta be like 2 months now. Going on 2 months. And I got sick, I don't know. I guess a week ago that I got sick, and I'm still recovering from that. I don't want to be too much of a downer, so we're not going to spend too much time on that. No. But it is worth mentioning that those things are true, right? Because truth is all about what you express to others. I have this theory, right? That truth is all about what can be observed by others, right? Truth isn't this objective thing, not in reality, not in the way that humans use the word truth. In the way that humans use the word truth, truth is this intersubjective agreement, right? Yeah. So, as far as other people go, if they agree with whatever I say the truth is, then that makes the truth the truth. Yeah. Isn't that great? You don't actually have to be objectively right in order to speak the truth. And you don't need doublethink either. How do I move? Okay, great. I haven't played this fishing sim in a long time. I'll tell you what. I've been looking at a lot of different fishing games on the Nintendo Switch. The eShop store, and other places, right? GameStop and places like that. Wherever they have sales for Nintendo games, I'm looking there. It's one of my few joys in this life, looking for games on sale. And I have been looking at the fishing simulation games as well. Not just the simulators, but the ones that are more RPG based. Can you believe that? There are fishing games out there that aren't actually based on fishing. They're out there just to give you this kind of experience, right? Like, I get it. There's this, it's not about realism, right? When you get into a game like that. It's more about enjoying the moment. There are things like, Animal Crossing, for example, where you don't actually go fishing for the sake of fishing. You're fishing because you want the golden fishing rod, or you want to give that fish to Blathers in the museum. Not in this case. This is fishing for the case of fishing. Yeah. And I really enjoy that, right? Fishing for the case of fishing. But a lot of people seem to be enjoying the game web fishing these days, which I think is more of an Animal Crossing kind of collectathon, right? There's nothing wrong with a good collectathon. I know they're outdated nowadays. Like, Ukulele was on sale recently on the Nintendo shop, and Ukulele is one of those collectathon games that is based on those old 3D platformers like Banjo-Kazooie. That's exactly where it comes from, right? Banjo-Kazooie. Ukulele. Makes sense. But, yeah. It's exactly like that in some sense, where you're trying to collect things, and that's it. Here, on the other hand, we're just playing fishing games for the sake of playing fishing games. We want to catch fish. It doesn't matter if we catch every species of fish available in this river. Not possible, if you ask me, right? The way we fish, it is just not possible. We're going to catch specific fish every single time. Sometimes certain fish will not be there. Sometimes certain fish will not attack certain baits. We're using live bait, we're using minnows, so yeah. We're not going to catch carp or anything, right? Which is very strange to me as a fisherman in real life, because if you use minnows in real life, you will catch carp, so long as you're bouncing the minnows off the bottom of the substrate, the surface, or the riverbed, right? I don't know how many of you are fishermen out there, how many of you are anglers, but I'm an avid angler in real life. I don't do any ice fishing, but I do fish most other times of the year, and I fish for freshwater species all around. So, I know a thing or two about fishing, which is really great in real life, because, when the apocalypse hits, you're gonna want to know how to do that kind of thing, right? You're gonna want to know those skills. It's like, hot wiring a car. or robbing a bank. You really want that kind of stuff. Baking cookies? Well, hello, Diana. Nice to see you. I'm glad you're baking cookies. Cookies are great, right? It is that time of year. We're getting there, right? We're getting into December, and I know we're only halfway through November, but people are already playing Christmas songs in the supermarkets, so I can't really complain too much. If you're baking cookies and you can't talk, perfectly understandable. I'll just be here talking to myself, which is what I typically do anyway, right? Yeah. Yeah. Um, what was I talking about? Fishing in real life, right? Yeah, it's a great skill to have. How to do it in real life. I highly suggest it. It's very calming, in a way. Yeah. Artificial baits. Oh, artificial baits are a catch-all term for anything that isn't a natural bait. So natural baits are things like earthworms, minnows, which are live fish, leeches, tadpoles even, whatever. Helgrammites. Helgrammites are these tiny little arthropods that are nymph stages of other arthropods. Any of those things would be natural baits, right? And artificial baits are things like thermoplastics, metals, and dough baits. They exist, and they're very good. Some waterways are restricted in what you can use, so the highly conservationist waterways require you to use natural baits, things like helgrammites and earthworms and waxworms and minnows, things that would be alive, naturally part of the food process or the food pyramid, or that ecosystem. Some, on the other hand, would be things like artificial lures only, and those would be things like fly fishing, so tide flies. My grandfather used to do a lot of that. I never really got into it, so I can't really say too much on the topic. Tide flies are very interesting, though. You have to be kind of intelligent about it, right? Tide flies require an understanding of the ecosystem, as well as the hatch cycle of, I guess, insects for that period. If you want to do tide flies and fly fishing properly, you have to be aware of what is naturally... Oh, I have 3 hands there. What is naturally in the environment at a specific time, which is something that was way beyond me when I was a kid, when my grandfather was still alive. So I don't fault anyone for not being aware of the hatch cycles of perhaps insects at the time. But I do know a little bit about that. I gotta say that fly fishing is a lot tougher than using a spinning reel. Spinning reels are like the gateway into fishing as far as freshwater fishing goes. Yeah. Artificial lures, though, they're very useful in that you can use them multiple times, right? If you use live bait, usually one fish will eat that bait, and that's it. You can't cast that again, you have to put a new one on your hook. But when you're talking about artificial lures include things like spoons and jigs and thermoplastic soft baits. If you don't know what a spoon is basically a spoon-shaped, like the scooping part of a spoon-shaped piece of metal on a lure. If you don't know what a jig is typically a weighted hook with something on it. Something that looks like a bait, like a thermoplastic grub. And you basically fish them quite differently. I think we actually have a few spoons and jigs. We can do that in a second if you'd like. I don't actually have too much of a problem with either of them. I will say that I'm more inclined to using natural baits, not just for environmental friendliness, although that is part of it, but cookies for potluck tomorrow. I missed that. uh, potluck tomorrow. On the 20th? Or 19th? 19th, I'm sorry. I don't know what day it is. Potlucks are fun, yeah. I'm glad you're baking cookies for potlucks. Like, not enough people bake for potlucks. I'm talking about spoons and jigs, aren't I? What do I usually use? I usually use minnows, yeah. Like, I'll give you this for free. I don't care about OPSEC anymore. My grandfather, he pioneered a lot of fishing techniques with minnows. And he has a few, well, he had a few records, right? Like national records for fish when it came to fishing associations and fishing tournaments. He had a few records for minnows, live minnows, which is really a shame, right? It's very hard for me to reconcile my fishing technique, which requires live minnows, and my thoughts that fishing should not be something that is, you know, destructive to the environment. Right? Like, I'm trying to have fun here, but at the same time, I'm not really trying to destroy ecosystems. But if I have to use live minnows for my fishing techniques, which are inherited by my family 3 generations now, I am probably the 3rd and final generation to receive the wisdom of this fishing technique. I don't know. I don't really have anything against live bait. I don't really have anything against artificial lures. They're all useful for different situations, right? Live bait is great in almost every case. Artificial bait is great for cases where you're likely to snag a lot, right? If you think about it, live bait is very soft. It's made of human, or it's not made of human flesh, it's made of fish flesh, right? Or it's made of insect flesh. And it's very easy to rip it in two. It's very easy to break it apart. So if you get snagged on the bottom of a riverbed, or on a snagging piece of wood on the bottom of a river, then you have to be very careful. If you pull too hard, your bait will rip in two, and you'll lose part of your minnow, which is not great, right? Really cool? I don't know if it's really cool. It's just part of how I was raised, right? Like, I've been very open about it, right? I was raised in the country. I'm very rural when it comes to my upbringing. I don't know if that actually comes through. 3 hands again. But I was a very rural kid. And it's very surprising given that I am an anime VTuber, right? In my experience, most VTubers are city dwellers, right? They're city folk. And there's nothing wrong with city folk. It's just a very different way of living, a very different perspective on what it means to be alive. So I might have a different perspective when it comes to things that involve nature. Things like hiking, or foraging, or hunting, or fishing even. Yeah. I don't know. But a lot of my techniques for fishing come from my grandfather and my father, and there are my 3 hands again. Very strange I have 3 hands. Maybe I'm a mutant. Maybe I have mutated myself and grown a 3rd hand, like in the Fallout universe. I did buy Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics recently, on sale on Steam. I highly recommend them, they're very good games. I did enjoy 3 and New Vegas. New Vegas being my favorite, of course. What was I talking about? Right, the apocalypse. When the apocalypse comes, it's going to be very useful to have skills like fishing. So I really can't say that artificial lures are a bad thing. Artificial lures are multi-use kind of things, right? Artificial lures are there because you want to use a lure multiple times. That's the only advantage, I think, over natural baits and live fish baits and bait fishes. Did you know there's a difference between fish baits and bait fishes? So bait fishes are legally defined as fish that are used as bait, and fish baits are used exclusively to define things which are used as baits for fish. So minnows would be bait fishes, and things like worms would be fish baits. Very strange, but that's the way it goes. Humans are very arbitrary in the way that they assign these taxonomic nomenclatures, right? I think it's very fascinating how humans assign these labels without too much meaning behind them. Yeah. I don't know. I think there are uses for each, though. For example, dough baits. Power bait, for example. Power bait's probably the most common dough bait out there, right? If you don't know what power bait is, it's essentially this Play-Doh consistency dough that comes in a jar. There are different colors, different flavors and scents, but it is essentially the same thing. Mostly flour mixed with water, with flavorant, or some kind of smell to it. Sometimes they add glitter. Sometimes they add color, and they make swirls out of it. So you have that contrast. Contrast is nice in certain weather conditions, right? Yeah. Sometimes when it's bright out, fish don't go for the brightly colored things. Sometimes when it's bright out, they'll go for the duller colored things. Things like earthworm colored brown, for example. But sometimes when it's rainy out and it's cloudy and there's not too much light, they'll go for something shinier. Something with a nice bit of glitter to it that will mimic the flash of a fish scale, like a minnow, as it's swimming through the water. A lot of fishing is presenting your lure or bait as if it were naturally some kind of, I don't know, part of the ecosystem, part of the food pyramid, right? So you have to make it look like it's real. Make it look like it's something edible. Just like modern advertising, right? You get this junk product like, I don't know, Little Debbie brownies, for example. And you make it look like it's actually food, when it's not actually food. So long as you make it bright with those cosmic sprinkles, someone will buy it, and someone will eat it. Right? It doesn't matter how garbage it is. It doesn't matter if it's made of metal. It really doesn't. The fish will go after it. Yeah. I'll be very honest with you here. I'm mostly a trout fisherman. That's what I like to fish for. It's one of those sports fish that is always nice to catch. And they're very easy to predict, right? There are multiple kinds of trout that are stocked in my state. Rainbows, browns, and brook trout. Brook trout are actually closer related to char, so they're on the salmon family as well, but they're closer to salmon than brook trout, or rather brown trout and rainbow trout. And they all have different kinds of intelligences, right? Like, you wouldn't think about it, but fish are rather intelligent things. They have to watch out for all of these different predators in their environment. Least of all humans, of course, but things like raccoons and birds of prey as well. So they have to have this amazing kinetic vision. You have to be wary of the way that a fish would think. I know that sounds strange, right? Like, this fish is a lower life form, and you have to outthink the fish. I know. It's very strange. But I'll give you a little tip here. Fish typically look upstream, right? Especially predatory fish. Predatory fish like trout and bass. If a bass is in a stream or a river. Things like pike and walleye are probably more in rivers. But you will find bass in rivers as well. They're not just pond fish, even though they're they typically are in ponds. Bass tend to do better in ponds than other fish because they don't really rely on the current so much. They're a lot hardier of fish. But when you're talking things like pike, walleye, and trout, and muskie as well, they'll typically look upstream because that's where the food is flowing from, right? Yeah, they'll typically look up to where the water is coming from because there is food in the water that is flowing down. So, they have very good vision. If you've ever heard of a fisheye lens, for example, they have kind of almost, I want to say it's like 280 degrees of vision, just looking up. That's much better than a 90-degree field of view, right? That you're used to in first-person shooters. If you can get 280 degrees of vision, you pretty much know what's going on all around you. The only thing you can't see is what's right behind you. So, that's why a lot of the advice when you're fishing for these kind of fish is to walk upstream. It's a very simple thing to do, but a lot of people don't do it. They'll go downstream because it's easier. And they'll lose out on then they'll lose out on these fish, right? Which is ridiculous to me. There's no reason to do it. So, we were talking about dough baits, right? Let's see if I actually have any dough baits. I don't know if I do. I know I have live minnows, I have bread, chicken liver, I have all these lures, right? I don't actually have any dough baits. That's very interesting. That's okay. We don't have any spoons or jigs either. Well, technically we have some rooster tails, which, these things right here. You see this? These ones? These are rooster tails, right? Although they don't have the thread along the hooks, the treble hooks. They do have a spoon attached to them. And the spoon actually is that little metal part that spins around the lure itself. It simulates the flashing of a wounded minnow. The only problem is that you have to have the water conditions right. If you're not reeling fast enough, the spinning won't actually happen. The spoon won't spin around the lure itself. You'll end up with a flat lure that just kind of whooshes through the water, which is okay. It's not ideal. You'll still get the sound of something going through the water, as if it's a wounded minnow. But it won't look like a wounded minnow. And smart fish will not bite on that. Yeah. So that is something to consider. But you don't have to have a live fish in order to use that. One batch in. Cool, after rolling my hands. I see. Clean hand to respond. Yeah, yeah. You know, it may sound strange, but I've cooked a lot of cookies while watching streams before. I know exactly what you're going through. Where you have to wash your hands every time you're trying to reply. Yeah. Don't feel like you're obligated to reply. I appreciate you being here, but you absolutely don't have to type or talk. That's perfectly fine if you're busy. I will say, however, use cold water whenever possible for washing your hands between cookies. The cold water will solidify the fats, and it's a lot easier to clean that way. When you're finally done washing your hands, of course use hot water and soap. Soap being a non-polar solvent, it will help you remove those fats from your hands. But the cold water will help the gluten not stick. That's cool. Really don't want a cookie dough-covered keyboard. You know, I don't blame you. Like, depending on the cookies you're making, I don't know what you are making. I highly recommend the oatmeal peanut butter cookie recipe that I have on my channel that I made myself if you ever want an oatmeal peanut butter cookie. Nods, yep. But yeah. Whatever cookies you're making, I completely understand. It's very hard. Even when you're using something like a mobile device, like a touchscreen, iPad, or tablet, or phone. Like, I wouldn't want cookie dough on that either. The fats on the screen just kinda... They're very hard to clean, right? And I don't blame you for that. I wouldn't blame you at all. Yeah. I don't know. It is getting that time, right? Like, it's getting to be that time where people are going to be making their cookies for the year. I have to start making mine as well. That's one of the few things that I actually do every year for the holidays, right? Making cookies. Chocolate chip cookies, I see. Mother's cookies. Best sugar cookies I've ever had. A lot of cookie time? Oh, I see. It's very interesting. It seems like you're making a lot of cookies and this is for potluck, right? I'm not really a big fan of sugar cookies. I'll be honest and upfront about that. Sugar cookies to me seem like a waste of a cookie, right? They're this weird halfway point between like shortbread cookies, which are fantastic, and a delicious cookie of any other variety. um, they're just very strange to me, right? They look interesting a lot of the times because sugar cookies can be very pretty, but they don't necessarily taste very good. Chocolate crinkle cookies, very different. Oh, yes. Chocolate crinkles are very different. I thought you said chip. My bad. So chocolate crinkle cookies, for those of you who do not know, assuming that I'm remembering my cookies correctly, are chocolate-flavored cookies that use cocoa, and they're rolled in powdered sugar before they're baked, and they get this kind of crinkly, crackled surface, right? A lot of people call them different names, so maybe I'm not thinking of the same ones, but if that's the same cookie, they're very good. They're just traditionally not very sweet. They have a slightly sweet exterior, right? They're actually very good with tea, very good with coffee. Yeah. I see. Most sugar cookies aren't great, but your mother's are very good. It's good to know. Exactly correct. Very good. I'm glad that my cookie knowledge is paying off. For those of you who do not know, I enjoy baking, and I've enjoyed baking for a very long time in my life. At least since middle school? Yeah. When I first started baking in middle school, I got into baking, and I've really enjoyed it since. Every year, I try to make holiday cookies, right? And if Diana here has a good recipe for sugar cookies, then I don't know. But I've never had a good recipe for sugar cookies. They just seem like a waste of potential, right? Like, if you're gonna make sugar cookies, you might as well make chocolate chip cookies, or kind of walnut cookie. Anything, really. Like, the sugar on the exterior is nice. It can be pretty. You can make it all kinds of shapes, and you can turn them into trees with green sprinkles that are glittery. And they're very pretty. But I have not had a good recipe for taste. So if you actually have a good recipe for taste, then I'm kind of envious. I've tried a lot of cookies in my lifetime, you know? And I've never had a good sugar cookie. I'm not saying they don't exist, obviously. Ooh, down on the tension. A little bit more down on the tension. Yeah. If they exist, then that's great. Chocolate crinkles are a lot easier. I know in my life, chocolate crinkles have been recommended to beginners for I don't know how long. As long as I can remember, at least. I never started with chocolate crinkles, I started with chocolate chip cookies. And I remember that being a pain, because the brown sugar is never like the same. Brown sugar is always slightly different in the moisture content, which will affect your chocolate chip cookies quite a bit. Yeah. But chocolate crinkles, they don't actually have that much difference. The only difference is going to be in the moisture of the eggs themselves. And eggs typically are about 55 grams. Large eggs are about 55 grams. So they're not too different between them, right? So large eggs are always going to be about the same. There's more difference in the amount of moisture in brown sugars than there is in the moisture of eggs, for example. Maybe someday you'll share. Ah. Well, I'd appreciate it if you shared, but you don't have to, right? Like, there are family things that my family does that I can't share. So I completely understand, right? Yeah. Asking your family, or your mother specifically. Perfectly understandable. Feel free not to share. I think that's part of the great thing about different families, right? The family recipes. When I was growing up, I was kind of isolated from the family recipes, and I didn't really get to learn too many of them. Even though a lot of cookie recipes in my family are very family-oriented, very different from other families' recipes for the same cookies, for example. So I understand. I'm not asking you to share. I'm just being a bit envious if you have a good buttery, I guess, sugar cookie recipe, right? Don't have the time or energy? Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Christmas cookies. I don't even know what to say about Christmas cookies, right? Like, a lot of people put a lot of effort into Christmas cookies. And, I've never been one of those types, right? When it comes to Christmas cookies, I think Christmas cookies are best enjoyed, eaten while drunk. That's usually how my family enjoys them, while they're drinking. So they don't have to look nice, right? But a lot of people, a lot of families, they'll put a lot of effort into how their cookies look. And I think that's where sugar cookies excel, right? There are all kinds of different sugars or sprinkles that you can put on a sugar cookie, right? Of course, there are the common greens and reds for Christmas, but you can get really creative with them, right? Like, they have those pearls, they have different glittery kinds of sprinkles. They even have jimmies, right? You know what I'm talking about when I say jimmies? Jimmies are those thousands and thousands. Whatever you want to call them. We call them jimmies here. That's probably strange for most people. But they're called sprinkles, right? And they're basically the elongated ones. Then there are like the snowflake ones, which are just rounded, not the snowflake ones, the ones they put on nonpareils, you know what I'm talking about? Those white round ones that are very tiny, but very nice for a lot of sugar cookies. A lot of people go all out on their sugar cookies, making them look the most, Christmas as they can. I always found that strange, right? Like, you're spending 20 minutes on each cookie that's going to be eaten in 30 seconds. But I get it. I get it. People make gingerbread houses too. And it's not about how the gingerbread tastes, it's how it looks. Huh? Don't like thick sprinkle cookies? No, no. Yeah, yeah. Sprinkling sugars are great. Sprinkling sugars are exactly what I'm talking about. The green sprinkling sugars are perfect for making Christmas tree Christmas cookies, right? they're so shiny and they have that nice crunch to them. So a very buttery cookie base actually goes very well with them. I will say, however, that if I were going to have a buttery cookie base, I would prefer a shortbread, right? I don't know. There's something about the crunch of those sugar sprinkles that just doesn't agree with me when it comes to a shortbread cookie. Like, I get it. That's the textural difference. And of course, having that crunch from the sugar crystals is going to make the cookie a lot more enjoyable from a textural aspect. But personally, I dip my cookies in drinks, right? I'm very Roman in that aspect. I enjoy dipping my cookies in wine, for example. I know that's very strange. A lot of people dip their cookies in milk. A lot of people dip their cookies in coffee. Me? No. Very Roman. Red wine is what you're supposed to dip your cookies into, right? So adding that extra, like, sugary crunch from the sugar crystals, it just doesn't do well with the wine as a dipping medium. Otherwise, I could understand it, right? If you're just eating the cookie on its own, which I think is blasphemy, I think it's the wrong way to eat a cookie. If you're going to do that, I guess having that extra crunch is fine. But if you're going to dip it into something, it's going to dissolve very quickly. And I don't think that's a great idea. Very pretty, though. Very pretty. I will give it that. Personally, I'm much more in the form and taste than the aesthetic. No, not form. Form is the aesthetic, function and taste, as opposed to form and aesthetic, right? Of a cookie. I think it has to taste good before it looks good. But other people disagree, right? I know several people out there who will say that, a cookie tastes best when it looks cute. I think Hyde just likes alcohol. Yes, yes, Hyde likes alcohol. Hyde likes alcohol quite a bit. Cookies mixing. That's very interesting. That is very interesting. Oh, we're having a hiccup here in my stream. I'll look at that after I catch this fish. But, yeah, I do like alcohol. And I think alcohol actually improves the flavor of a lot of cookies. Like, tiramisus. Ladyfingers are great with alcohol, right? The slightly buttery, almondy flavor just goes very well with alcohol, right? Here's a fun fact. Most biscotti, back in the Roman era... Let me check my internet here. Back when there were Romans, there we go. They would dip their biscotti into alcohol, right? Coffee wasn't quite as widespread. There were coffee houses in the Middle Ages, of course, in Europe. And, yeah, they were hangouts for the intellectuals, the intelligentsia. But that doesn't mean that they were widespread. The commoners were dipping their biscotti into red wine. And I gotta tell ya, nothing pairs quite as well with biscotti coated in chocolate as a nice, semi-sweet red wine. If you've never done that before, I highly recommend it. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense in certain cookies. Ones which are typically eaten with alcohol, of course. Typical desserts like that. Cookies are great like that, right? Like, they can absorb flavors. A lot of cookies are very dry. Especially shortbreads and traditional cookies like biscottis. Or I guess biscotti is the plural of biscotto. No one ever goes to like a barista and says, "Hey, I'd like a large coffee with a biscotto." Right? No one does that. They always say, "I'd like a large coffee with a biscotti." No one's that pedantic when they're speaking English, right? Yeah. Maybe I would be. Maybe I would be so pedantic that I would say, "I'd like a biscotto. Give me one singular biscotto." It's like saying, "Give me a spaghetto," right? Because spaghetti is plural, right? I don't know if people realize that, but spaghetti is plural, as is biscotti. It's that I ending at the end. Yeah, of course it's at the end. Where else would an ending be? But that makes it plural. So you don't say I'd like a spaghetto. No. But you do say I'd like a gelato. And I always wondered if, it'd be like gelati. I'd like 5 gelati, please. I don't know. That's one of those strange plurals that I don't think translates into English very well. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those strange things. Eh, wait, no. No, I don't want that. Please, please. Yes, thank you. It is getting to be that time, and I have to start thinking about baking my own cookies. I completely understand. Potlucks, though? I don't know. It's not even American Thanksgiving yet, right? I have to get through American Thanksgiving before I have to start worrying about, Christmas. Which is strange, right? Like, most of the world, they're already playing Christmas music, if they have that inclination. And, here we are in the USA, still worrying about, American Thanksgiving. Oh, we have to go through turkey first, and turkey means pies, right? I don't know about your families, but for me, turkey means pie. Yeah. um, we have not talked about anything that I actually set out in my notes here. I do have notes for today, and I did mean to start talking about them a while ago. Somehow I got sidetracked by cookies, but it's been on my mind too. I have to buy more chocolate for my cookies. I have to buy them in bulk too. And I also have to buy sugar in bulk, but that's mostly because I make alcohol in bulk. You're allowed to make, I think it's 500 pounds. No, no, no. I think it's 250 gallons of wine per household per year in the USA. So you can make 250 gallons of alcohol per household, I think. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 250. I can't remember. No one's gonna come and say, Hyde, you can't make more alcohol. Point is, I go through a lot of sugar, okay? I go through quite a lot of sugar. Probably hundreds and hundreds of pounds of sugar per year. With all the baking I do and all the alcohol I make, I go through a lot of sugar. And I have to buy more sugar during the holidays, for both of them, right? Because I like to make mulled wine during the holidays. I like to make a lot of cookies during the holidays. I'd like to make cinnamon rolls during the holidays too. There are lots of baked sweets that I like to make during the holidays that I think are just very holiday oriented, right? A lot of the world seems to think that cinnamon and ground ginger are like holiday spices. They're Christmas spices that you wouldn't find outside of Christmas. The USA is very strange in that regard, as far as I can tell. And that cinnamon is one of those spices that is just commonly used in sweets throughout the year. Cinnamon rolls are not a Christmas thing. They are just a breakfast thing, right? Yeah, cinnamon rolls are a common breakfast. Which I find very strange, right? A lot of the world would not consider a cinnamon roll to be a breakfast. They would find that to be a dessert. And they would look at me strange if I suggested that you should eat a dessert for breakfast. But I don't care. I think it's breakfast, right? Yeah. And I will not apologize for it. It does not have to be breakfast, it does not have to be dessert. But it is, in our case, it is. Yeah. So I don't know. The fact that cinnamon is one of those spices that is just not commonly used outside of Christmas time in Europe, for example, doesn't make a difference to me. Very American in that sense. I will have my big red chewing gum with its cinnamon flavor all of the year. That's perfectly fine by me. And honestly, cinnamon is great in savory dishes, so long as it's used sparingly. I think people ought to use cinnamon a little bit more often, right? Yeah, it doesn't have to be a sweet dish spice. It is perfectly great as an accent spice. I know that sounds strange, but if you've ever had a curry, perhaps cinnamon has been in there, and you just haven't realized it, you know? The heart says it's breakfast, it's breakfast. Yeah, that's what I say about alcohol all the time. If the heart says wine is breakfast, then wine is breakfast. Very Roman of me as well, right? Wine is a fantastic breakfast. It's not empty calories if you're using them throughout the day. With me baking soon, will there be another baking video? It's a good question. Last year, I gave my recipe for oatmeal peanut butter cookies, right? That's a recipe that I've been working on for years and years on my own. I don't actually have any other recipes that I think I can give that are my own. I could do other recipes. I could give other cookie recipes that I enjoy, but I don't think I could give my own recipes, right? The only other recipes would be family recipes, like, I've talked about making pizzelles, right? Pizzelles being an Italian cookie that are, snowflake-shaped, very thin wafer cookies. I could do something on that. But it wouldn't be my recipe. It would be my grandmother's recipe, or it'd be my great-aunt's recipe. It wouldn't be my recipe. Which, I don't know. It feels a bit off to me, right? Like, you have to ask your mother about sharing your sugar cookie recipe, right? I can't ask my, oh, technically it'd be my great-grandmother, or my great-aunt. My great-aunt's still alive, thankfully. Great-grandmother is not. So, I could ask for one of those, but I don't know if I really should. Like, most of you probably don't even have a pizzelle iron, right? So you're not going to be able to make it anyway. I'd have to think about a recipe that people could typically make very easily. That's why I shared my peanut butter oatmeal cookie recipe. It was made to be a convenient recipe. You can make it all in one bowl. You can make it all in a couple minutes. All you gotta do is boil some water. That's the hardest part. Then you form everything into a dough. It's very easy. Very easy to make the peanut butter oatmeal cookies. But other recipes that I have are a lot more difficult, right? I wouldn't mind making more cookies with a video. I just don't know if they'd be quite as easy as that. Yeah. I wouldn't mind it though. I really wouldn't mind baking, right? Finish fishing, go back. I think baking is one of my, one of those few hobbies that I actually enjoy a great deal. We got a lot of fish here. Look at all that money racking up. But yeah, fishing is one of those hobbies. Oh, wrong one. We don't want to do leaderboards here. Baking is one of those hobbies that I really enjoy, and I wouldn't mind doing more videos on it. I was actually thinking about that the other day too, right? We're having more hiccups here. We've lost about 14.5% of our frames today. Not ideal. I was working on something the other day, and my internet connection was a lot better So I really don't know what's going on there. It's very hiccupy. Very, does what it wants. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, maybe I'll do another baking video. I have another live action video planned out. I just haven't done it, right? Like, it's gonna be one of those videos that is, I really need to think about it in advance, because I can't do it again. I only get one take with this video, so I haven't done it quite yet. It's not baking. It's more in line with the chocolate taste test kind of thing. And I have something very special. I just have to think about what would the funniest thing to do with it be, right? It's very strange. Being a content creator for the last year, I've started to look at things very differently, right? Like, I used to think about things and be like, hey, I could enjoy this, and maybe this would be fun. And now I look at something and be like, how can I make a video about this? It's very not great. Oh no. Yeah, pretty much. That's how I feel. Oh no. It reminds me a lot of when I first started learning about geology in college, right? When I first started taking geology courses, I was an avid nature lover. Like, I loved going out and hiking and going through the forest and fishing. I was like that way before I was a geologist, right? But when I went into college and I started learning about rocks, and sedimentary rocks in particular, I started looking at mountains very differently. I started looking at streams very differently. I started looking at these things and being like, oh, that's a paleo environment. This shale here represents an ancient ocean. That kind of thing. Instead of just seeing the, oh, that's a pretty outcrop, or that's a pretty mountain, or that's a pretty hill. And I kind of feel like, that's the same way. Like, it isn't that I've lost an appreciation. It's that my perspective has shifted, very, very drastically. Sociologist, my mind also works differently. Yeah. I bet whenever you see people line up out in front of like a store or in front of a movie theater, it makes your mind tick a little bit differently than the average person, right? Like, I'm sure you have that kind of experience. Whenever you see a crowd of people, you're thinking about something that's very different from the average experience. I had 3 hands again. That's exactly how I feel about those kind of things, right? Nature especially. But, also other things, yeah. And, I don't know. It isn't really losing an appreciation for what's there. It's gaining an appreciation for something that you hadn't noticed before. That makes the appreciation of what's there even greater. But it definitely changes the perspective and makes it a lot less relatable to other people who don't have that perspective. Ah. Yeah, that's true. When I say average, I don't actually have an average either. I I say this a lot when it comes to averages and statistics, right? But the average is just this theoretical thing that doesn't actually exist. It's very strange when you're talking about human systems especially, because the average could be very not real. You know what I'm talking about? Like, when you're talking about the average human, there might be 0 humans that are average, because average is the statistical anomaly that you just create out of thin air, essentially. So there might be 0 humans that actually fit what would be considered average. There could be a lot of modal humans, right? Modal would be most often occurring for you mathematicians out there. But the mode could be very different from the average, because there could be extreme outliers that skew the average one way or the other, or both ways, and make it so the average is not real. For example, when I was growing up, the average reproduction rate was 2.5 children per couple. You can't have 2.5 children per couple. That's not a real average, right? So, the average 2.5 indicates that there were between 2 and 3 children per 2 people reproducing. But that's not real. That's what I mean by the average not being real. It's not representative. It's kind of an abstract articulation of what actually exists. The reality would be a mode of either 2 or 3, right? Because you can't have a half a child. Well, you can if you're King Solomon, right? 3 hands being good for fishing, absolutely. Often when I'm fishing, I think having 3 hands would be a lot easier than having 1 or 2. A lot easier than 1, for example. Like, if you look how I'm reeling this in, this is exactly how it happens in real life, too. Yeah. You gotta have 2 hands if you want to be very good at fishing. Yeah. Yeah. I realize that a lot of natural scientists probably think these averages are realer than they are. I don't know how better to phrase that. Being a natural scientist myself, I'm no stranger to averages being decimals or fractions, right? But in the human world, decimals and fractions don't always make sense. And these abstract averages just don't really make sense in except in except except for in the case of, you know, an abstract sense where it's not true, but you understand what it's trying to imply. It is very frustrating. I completely agree with you. This is part of the reason why I went into a natural science instead of the human sciences like sociology and psychology. I was recommended to go into psychology, right? Because apparently I have a natural gift for psychology. I don't know what that means. That's just what I was told in high school. Maybe I don't have it anymore, right? Maybe I've lost that over the years. Too many years of studying rocks have, calcified my pineal gland, and I just can't understand humans anymore. But, yeah, it is kind of frustrating. I've worked in human sciences after that, and I have to say, I've never liked using averages. Whenever I can, I've avoided using averages in favor of modes. Yeah, I just don't know. Averages seem like the worst kind of thing to use in human sciences. They seem like the most unrealistic. The most average human out there just doesn't exist. It's this fictional concept. And I just don't know. I'd rather be using modes whenever possible. Of course, statistics... There are appropriate times to use averages, and appropriate times to use modes, and appropriate times to use other things as well. So, I'm not saying that modes are all in all better. I'm going to say that modes are all in all more appropriate for human studies, I think. That is my argument. And you can feel free to argue against that. Maybe that's a controversial take, right? Maybe I'm just spouting off nonsense. But I don't know. It's one of those discrete measurements, right? Where having half a human just doesn't make sense in my brain. And using averages that use half a humans, or 0.25 humans, just doesn't make sense. I can imagine that being extremely frustrating, yes. Especially for psychology, right? Like sociology, you kind of have to do averages, you kind of have to do statistical analyses. That's part of it. But psychology, when you're dealing with like very small groups of individuals or one individual, it doesn't make sense to do with averages, right? Like most of the time, you're dealing with one individual, a lot of case studies, and yeah, talking about the average of the individual might make sense, but talking about average individuals, that doesn't make much sense to me. um, I don't know. Again, all statistical analyses are manipulations of data, right? And any manipulation can be appropriate, given the right circumstances. I won't say that any are inappropriate, in any sense. I will say that more, or some of them make sense more than others, right? Yeah. I think that's fair. Some manipulations make more sense than others. And I hate it. I really do. Which is entirely, it's entirely on me, right? Like, it's an arbitrary value of mine. That, things that I don't like. So, I went into a more hard science, as they're called. I don't think they're any harder than social sciences. I think they have more concrete values more often, but that's not necessarily true either. They just have this, what do you call it? Like this aura of being more concrete. Even though, if you actually look into the sociology of science, you'll find the same things, right? You'll find that science is largely the social construct created by humans to try to explain what they observe. And that's fine and all, but it's still just humans trying to explain what they observe. Whether it be about human systems or geological systems. It's all the same to me. It just makes more sense to me to have halves in something like geology than it does to have halves in something like sociology. You know. I don't know. When I went into my field of study, I didn't want anything to do with humans because I always felt bad, right? Like, I didn't want to be responsible for human lives. I always thought that human lives were very valuable things, and that's just one of my arbitrary values, right? Like, there's nothing that actually makes a human life more valuable than a ladybug's life, more valuable than a panda's life. Nothing. Nothing at all. It's just arbitrary. Whatever you value. And, my values, for whatever arbitrary reason, seem to put a higher value on human life than panda or ladybug life. And, I didn't want to be responsible for that, you know? I didn't want to have this kind of responsibility where if human lives were affected by whatever I did, then I would feel bad, right? I didn't want that. I didn't want to be responsible for humans feeling bad. So I went into hard sciences instead of human sciences, despite what I was told any of my natural talents would be. Yeah. I'm kind of happier for it, right? Like, I really enjoy natural sciences, the hard sciences as they're called. I really don't think there's much of a difference. But I think I would be fine, you know, in human sciences, so long as there weren't actual consequences for my actions, right? What's the worst that happens if I get something wrong in geology? We drilled 10 feet too deep in this, I don't know, rig, this well site, on an oil rig. We drilled 10 feet too deep. Now we lost $1,000 on a permit. Well, that's fine. $1,000 isn't that much. It's quite a bit, sure. But it's not a human life, right? human lives are incalculable, right? The price is just priceless compared to exceeding a land permit. It's a no-brainer for me. I don't want to be responsible for, I don't know, something like in medicine, where, I don't know, I have to amputate your arm because I did something wrong, and now you have gangrene in your arm. No thank you. Or, I give you the wrong therapy, and you end up doing something bad, and you're a harm to others. No thank you. What's the worst that can happen in natural sciences, you know? Yeah, yeah. Uh, Plenty of mess-ups in geology could cost human lives. um, it's no secret. I haven't been keeping it one. That I used to work on oil rigs, right? And I've nearly lost my life countless times. uh, a number of times, right? I nearly lost my head one time when there was a kick. If you don't know what a kick is, it's when you're drilling and you hit a lot of gas that's trapped in the rocks, and you suddenly drill through a cap rock, and all that gas gets released, and it goes upwards very fast, bringing with it a lot of material, like rock chunks and metal bits from the shoe and from the drill bit. So yeah, I almost lost my head to that once. But Deepwater Horizon is probably one of the best examples of that in modern culture, where, yeah, you can have catastrophic rig failures, and a failure in geology is exactly what kind of thing would exacerbate that kind of issue. A geologist should be able to catch that kind of thing and say, hey, we're going to be going through some gas-rich rock here. Slow your roll down a little bit. Yeah. Yes, we covered a lot of them. They're very terrifying. But, we're talking about... The average rig has, what, 20 to 40 people on it at a single time? If you're talking about, some of the larger rigs, maybe some more, maybe some fewer. I don't know. It feels like a little bit easier for me to accept that I'm the cause of that kind of failure than it would be for something more direct, right? It's like the trolley problem, where some people feel better about... I'll give you a perfect example, right? When I was given the trolley problem as a kid in college, I would always say the most moral solution to the trolley problem is not interacting with the trolley problem at all. It is to let fate take its course, right? Not adjust the tracks. Because if you're not adjusting anything, you're not responsible. Your actions are not responsible. I don't like blaming people for inaction. It doesn't make sense to me. So that's kind of how I feel about that as well. Huh? I know it's strange, I know. But it makes sense to me, you know? Like, I don't believe that inaction is truly your responsibility. I think it's only your responsibility if you act, you know? Is that so strange? Like, I don't believe that people should be faulted for things that are beyond them. If you don't know what's gonna happen if you pull a lever, I don't think you should be held responsible for not pulling the lever. Even if you do know or what would happen when you pull a lever, I don't know if you necessarily should be held responsible for pulling the lever either. It may depend on the situation. Well, of course, yeah. I agree. There are some things that, you know, may depend on the situation. When we're talking about the trolley problem, for example, if you know, for example, that there's nothing on the other track, that if you pull a lever and a train will go to an empty track instead of one populated by workers, then by all means, you are probably responsible if you do not pull the lever. Actually, no, I don't know if you are responsible for not pulling the lever. You probably should pull the lever, but I don't know if you're responsible, right? The people who worked on the tracks are probably responsible if there's that kind of problem, right? You're not the worker responsible for that. But I think it would be different, right? There is a difference there. Pull the lever, Kronk. Yeah, you know, The Emperor's New Groove with David Spade. Apparently most of that script was ad-libbed, right? Like, they made that movie in a very strange way. Very different from other Disney movies, where, like, 90% of it was ad-libbed. The final script didn't exist until after the movie was written. Which I guess makes a lot of sense, right? Like, a lot of final scripts don't exist until after the movie is written. But I mean, it didn't have any script at all until the final movie was finished, and years later they were like, hey, we need this for archive purposes, apparently. I only found out that recently, in fact. That's one of those great things about YouTube Shorts. Like, I don't know what I was doing. I was probably looking at one of my own YouTube Shorts, and then I flicked it down, and I got recommended this Emperor's New Groove thing. And they were like, yeah, actually, the Emperor's New Groove was not written. It was entirely ad-libbed for most of the production. Which I find hilarious, right? Like, sure, David Spade is a comedic genius. For those of you who do not know, David Spade was Cusco, the Emperor in The Emperor's New Groove, right? And he was also an actor in a lot of Saturday Night Live. I don't know, I think it was like the 70s and 80s. I think it was 80s, probably 80s and early 90s. And he was with Chris Farley and Adam Sandler and Norm Macdonald, those types. Chris Rock, maybe? A couple times. Yeah. So that era. And yeah, he's a very, very intelligent guy, very, very funny. But he was often overshadowed by the other people in his clique, the Adam Sandlers out there. I don't know. Adam Sandler is one of those people who seems like a very intelligent person who tries to make himself seem very unintelligent through juvenile humor, right? Like, he made that movie, what was it called? Funny People? And David Spade was in there as well. Where his clique was basically talking about comedians being depressed, which is a common aspect of the comedian psychology, right? Might even be the average, if you want to talk about averages, right? Those things that don't actually exist. I don't know. But, yeah, he always seemed overshadowed by Chris Farley and Adam Sandler in any movie that he was introduced in, which I think is a real shame. The only movie that David Spade, other than The Emperor's New Groove, which didn't actually have his face in it, just his voice, being an animated movie, the only movie that had his face in it where he wasn't overshadowed might have been Joe Dirt. And Joe Dirt is such a strange movie, right? Like, it's kind of a celebration of rural America, but at the same time, it's kind of, a joke at the expense of rural America. And being someone who was raised in rural America, I don't know whether it's an anthem or, you know, something that's trying to make fun of me. I don't know. I think it's just one of those movies which is probably the only time where he actually shined as the lead, right? And he's self-aware, right? His humor is very self-aware. Always has been. But yeah, he was always a very improv-heavy kind of guy, right? Saturday Night Live, he would always roll with the punches. So him being cast as Cusco, the llama, the emperor, in the Emperor's New Groove, made a lot of sense. And it made a lot of sense that the movie was mostly improv as well. Yeah. Kronk, however, was... Well, who was he? I can't remember who Kronk was. But also improv. And it was mostly, as far as I can remember from the video, it was mostly supposed to be like, wouldn't it be funny if there was this idiot guard, right? And that's what it was. I don't know. I think it's fine. Last batch of cookies. That's great. Cookies take a lot of time to bake, right? Like the average cookie takes about 12 to 20 minutes. Well, the average batch of cookies takes about 12 to 20 minutes in an oven 350 to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Which is one of those things about averages again. They don't exist. Averages aren't real. Most baking recipes tell you to look about 5 minutes early, right? Because a lot of factors actually affect the baking of cookies. Aside from temperature, the thickness of a tray will affect the speed at which a cookie bakes, right? A thicker tray will make it take longer for a cookie to bake, but it will also probably give it a better rise, right? Because they won't be so quick to set, right? Yeah. So you'll have more time for a kind of... I don't want to call it an oven spring, because oven spring typically uses high heat at first. Baking is great, isn't it? I love baking. 3 hands again. Look at this. See this? Why can't I reel it in? Advanced cookie baking with Hyde. I don't know about advanced. I gotta be honest. I studied bread baking more than I studied cookie baking in my life. There are a lot of cookies that I just can't bake. Macarons, for example. And macaroons. Like, macaroons are very hard to bake. The egg whites just never stabilize for me. No matter how much cream of tartar I use, or, how I cool things, or whatever else I do. It just never stabilizes, and it ends up... What? No. It ends up, separating. And I end up with these gloopy macaroons. And macarons, I just... I don't know. The almond flour messes me up a lot. I'm not a very good baker. I can tell you that. I enjoy it. It's one of my hobbies. And it's always been one of my hobbies. Like, I've had a lot of hobbies in my life, right? Like, up. I've had a lot of hobbies in my life, right? And from time to time, I'll drop them. Especially in my adulthood, I've dropped a lot of hobbies. To be honest, I am surprised that I am still streaming, and I'm still I know, I haven't made too many videos as of late. My content has been very sporadic. I'm working on that. I have videos for next week planned out. I've already recorded things, they just need edited. I understand my content's been very sporadic as of late. It's gonna happen. Every November. And December too is going to be busy for me. That's just part of it. That's part of the Hyde experience. November is hell. And after I get through November, I've got to get through December. Which is less hell, but more busy work. Isekai, it's okay. Yeah, that's part of it too. Thankfully my tendinitis is apparently healing. I was very scared. I'll be honest with you, I was very scared that I had torn my rotator cuff because of how much pain I was in for so long. But thankfully it's healing. And I've only got minor aches, right? I've got about 90% mobility in my shoulder. With minimal pain. Minimal aches every day. Which is very good. I'm very happy about that. Getting COVID again, expectable. Expectable every November. It's expectable. Did stream die? Yes. Yes, the stream did have a hiccup there. I've lost 14.7% of my frames. Not great. I don't know what I'm paying for. It should be back, yeah. 3434 KB per S. Yes, we should be back. Not ideal, mind you. Like, my upload rate should be higher than that for what I'm paying for. But, we should be back. I have dropped 22,000 frames. Very nice. Very nice. And we're gone again. Hold on a second. Let me check what's going on here. You know, we still have not talked about anything that I wanted to talk about tonight. Like, I have topics planned out for today. And, I just haven't done it. There we go. We were in the 4,000s for there. Now we're back in the 3,000s. And you know what? 3,300 is probably fine. My bitrate's only a little bit higher than that in OBS. So, I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference in this game. Like, if you look at these, rock faces that we're looking at, they don't make any sense to me, right? Like, I was planning on doing a series on, rock faces in video games. And, just talking about what I could see in them. And looking at these textures, I can't see a thing in this. Like, maybe it's diorite. Maybe it's some kind of, I don't know, limestone, some massive limestone that's been jointed. But if you look at where my rod is right now, there's kind of a joint going through there. But it's not consistent with the joint down below it. That little diagonal line right there, at the tip of the rod, right there. And then the one that's kind of right below it. Over towards the center a little bit more right there. Yeah, it's not consistent, which is very strange, geologically speaking. Not impossible. We'd have to have an unconformity here somewhere. Which you would not expect to find in a massive outcrop of limestone, which is what it looks like. How did I get into the oil rig job? I applied, you know? When you have a bachelor's in geology, there are jobs for you on the oil rigs. You don't even have to have a bachelor's in geology, it just helps. Well, you know, yeah. It's interesting, right? When I was in middle school, one of my brothers had a friend in his college that went into geology, right? And his friend ended up in the oil rigs. Huh? Okay. Well, we're answering that question. What made me pursue that job? So his friend ended up in the oil rigs. And his friend ended up being able to live a decent lifestyle doing the old oil rig thing. And, I saw that, and I was like, you know what? He gets to basically do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and, he can take time off whenever he wants. I want to do that. I want to make money and take time off whenever I want, and I want to study science. So I will take geology, and I will go for that career path, right? It made a lot of sense at the time. The projection for geologists was something like, we were not going to meet the demands for geologists by 95% for the year of my graduation, which was ridiculous. So I thought, hey, job security, why not? Yeah. The breaks theoretically should have been nice. Theoretically, they should have been nice. I didn't end up getting a break. when I was working the oil rigs proper, I worked a period of about, I don't know, 6 to 8 months. Ooh, line broke. That's not great. So I worked about 6 to 8 months, and in all that time, I got maybe 4.5 days off. And it was like one day between... I think the longest I ever worked, 12-hour shifts for those oil rigs. Down. 12-hour shifts for those oil rigs per day. And typically 2 weeks per shift, although mine were much longer. I worked about, I think it was 80 days straight on those 12-hour shifts before I started going insane. Yeah. Oh yeah, mixed feelings. Very mixed feelings. I got in during a recession. During a period when gas and oil were very cheap and drilling was not happening. So those projections that I was talking about, that I tried my best for, you know, like I thought, hey, here's a secure future, maybe I can do this. No, life said no. And what happened was, I basically had to scrape by doing... Do you know what a black company is? Like, Japan has this culture of black companies, right? Where basically they abuse their workers and they don't give them any time off. They barely pay them. That's essentially what I was on the oil rigs, which is not great for a job as deadly as the oil rigs. Hate it when life does that? Yeah. But there was really nothing I could have predicted to counteract that, right? That's just something I had to deal with at the time. Very unfortunate. Other people have been in my same shoes, so it's not something I really care too much about. But it is something that happened. I have very mixed feelings. My workplace abused me. I did not get any time off. 5 days in about 8 months. And those days would have been like half days most of the time, right? So I'd work 12 hours, and then I would have 12 hours off. And then they would call me back in. Like, I was living out of, basically the on-site trailer. So oil rigs, they have these trailers for the workers, right? So I was living out of that for most of the time. And whenever I had a day off, I would go to a hotel room for the night. And then I would get called to a new well site. And then we'd drill for about, you know, however long it would take. And it was usually going about 250 miles per hour. Which is not great. That's very fast drilling. It didn't used to be like that. They used to drill a lot slower. So my job was a lot quicker than it used to be, right? And that was how they were making their money. How they were staying afloat during the recession and during the oil and gas. Wasn't a glut so much as it was. I don't know. The cartels do whatever they want, right? Yeah. They basically do whatever they want. They set the prices, and we agreed with them at the time, as a nation. So, the interesting thing about oil and gas rigs is they take about 10 years from planning to drilling and producing. So, any kind of shift in oil and gas is sort of time lagged, right? So they get these permits to drill, and then about 10 years later, you're getting gas or oil out of them. It takes that long. It's very ridiculous. That is how it works, though. So what we were doing when I was on the oil rigs was we were doing exploratory rigs. We were testing different formations in different regions, seeing if there were significant resources, right? Significant deposits. Something that would be profitable if they dug other wells in the same region, for example, or in the same formation. And once we did that, once we got down and our jobs were done, we didn't produce. No, we capped the wells. Which I found ridiculous, but we did. We capped them so that nothing would come out of them. And then we just left them there. These dug holes with nothing being produced. Because it didn't make sense to actually pump the oil or gas out of them and transport it. It wouldn't have made us any money to do it. So we didn't. we just capped the wells. And we left them for later. As some kind of, I don't know, reserve, I guess. It's strange, but that's how it works. So, oil's a very speculative market, right? The price of oil and gas is very dependent on how much has been produced that year, and how much is speculated to be producible in the next couple of years. Which is very, oftentimes not necessarily physically dependent, right? So the laws of physics don't necessarily, the laws of physics and chemistry don't necessarily dictate the price of oil and gas. A lot of it's political. A lot of it's geopolitical. A lot of it's however much is allowed to be put on the market. A lot of it's how much can be refined, right? Like a big bottleneck in oil and gas is not like, it's not actually the production of oil and gas. It's the fractionation of oil and gas in oil refineries, right? Fractionation is the separating of heavier and lighter molecules, which is necessary for all productions of hydrocarbons in some form or another. To make it usable, to make it standardizable. No one wants, like, methane in their gasoline. It seems dangerous, right? Much more volatile than typical gasoline would be. And, no one wants tar in their gasoline either. And tar is one of the heavier ones. But tar is great for asphalt. And asphalt's great for roads. So, you know, every fraction has a purpose. Oil and gas does not throw anything away. And yes, you have to call it oil and gas every single time. Yeah. It's not oil, it's oil and gas. It's a very strange kind of world to live in. And I went crazy. Absolutely. I absolutely went crazy. Working at least 12-hour shifts. I remember signing my timesheets and saying, yeah, 84 hours. 84 hours every time. Oh, it was great. It was a great overtime. Not great. I don't even want to talk about it. Like, I've avoided talking about certain things about that job because it is such a downer topic, right? Like, I know talking about that kind of work is a downer topic. And then that's not even adding the controversial aspect of using, you know, fossil fuels, which I get. Absolutely. Like, I wouldn't want it either. It's just how it works out sometimes, right? You gotta generate electricity, you gotta generate power. I wouldn't want to do it either, but that's what we had to do. And, yeah, there are a lot of aspects that I understand why other people probably would not be happy about me talking about. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm so much happier not working there. Unfortunately, it might have to happen again someday, right? That's just how it works. Someday I might have to go back. You never know. Life's like that. I don't hate my experiences. I'll be very honest. Working on the oil rigs, I met some of the nicest people that I've ever interacted with, right? They're very down-to-earth people. They're just there to do their job, get their paycheck, and feed their families. And, you know, I can't blame them. I can't blame them. I hope not. I hope not either. But it might happen, right? You never know. The world is like that. Sometimes these unexpected things happen. And, yeah, like, you gotta do what you gotta do. And I will never blame anyone who has to do what they think they have to do, you know? Like, I would be a hypocrite. There are a lot of jobs out there that I would find distasteful, that I just would not accept doing. But I could never blame anyone who actually goes out and does them, if they need to do them, right? Because they're just trying to survive, right? Yeah, they're just trying to survive. And that's exactly how most people in the oil rigs that I worked with were like. Just people trying to survive in a strange world. Now, there were some out there who wanted the oil money, right? They wanted to drive BMW, and even if it made no sense, because the oil rig was in the middle of a salt flat, and the salt on the dry air would corrode the paint of their expensive BMW. You know what? It doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. But yeah, a lot of people were just there, trying to make money to survive, feed their families. They were very nice people. And if there were other opportunities out there, I'm sure a lot of them would have taken them. But the unfortunate reality is, for uneducated people especially, you're probably not going to find much better. Like, you're risking your life on an oil rig. I can't tell you how many times I almost died. At least a handful. And we're not even talking about minor incidents where, like, I got staph infections. I was like, you know what? I don't need to see a doctor for that. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should see a doctor about that after a week of getting, like, a staph infection. Rusty metal everywhere. Big machines moving all over the place. Electrical wires that you can just trip over. Hearing damage constantly. Those diesel generators were set up in a series in a trailer. It was like an electric drum. No, not the oil rig. Oh, thankfully no. I was not working on the oil rigs. Oh no, I would hate to do that. I would feel too trapped. I was working in West Texas and New Mexico. So the Permian Basin. Great place. They drill really fast there. Very fast. We set some records there. I was part of some rigs that set some records there for their fast drilling. Not ideal. Did not enjoy it. Very... well, you know... we did what we had to, I guess. Yeah, the ocean rigs were very different, right? They needed a certain... a certain type of people, right? um... When I was working in the Permian Basin, it was very isolated, right? We would work these 12-hour shifts, and we were supposed to have 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So we were supposed to work 2 weeks, 12 hours a day. That would be the bare minimum. If your coworker, the night shift or the day shift person, couldn't work, you'd be working a 24-hour shift, and then you'd be working even longer. You'd be working a 36-hour shift. I think the longest I ever worked was 48 hours as a shift. And, I started getting to the point where I was like, you know what? This job ain't worth it. This job really ain't worth it. And, that's exactly where I got towards the end. Damn? Yeah, damn. I went insane. Like, I'm not kidding with you. You wonder how Hyde got this way. Hyde got this way by, well, first being born this way, but then working on oil rigs. Isolated. Hundreds of miles away from civilization. The only grocery stores for hundreds of miles would have been, like, Walmarts in big cities. You'd have to drive down these rig-maintained roads. So, a lot of roads in the Permian Basin were made by the companies. I don't want to name names specifically, but any big oil company would make a road out to their oil patch, their well patch, you know? Uh, they'd maintain these. Basically gravel if you're lucky, dirt if you're not. So just basically clay roads. And you'd have to drive up those and down those until you hit the highway. However long that would take, right? Usually very far away from a population center. So you were isolated for this entire time. At least 2 weeks. And as I was saying, 3 months might have been the longest time without a break from me. And I absolutely went insane. There was a period where there was a hurricane coming through or something. Tropical storms, maybe? And it was raining for several days straight. And everything was just wet mud outside. There's this tan beige mud. Being the smoker that I was, I had to go outside to smoke. We were only allowed to smoke in a designated smoking area, which was this cordoned off picnic table. At that time, it was inhabited by black widow spiders, the poisonous ones, and I would go out there to smoke with them, enjoy their company, right? And after like a week straight of rain, everything was just inches to half a foot deep of mud. Walking was just mud. Your feet would get stuck. And I just drove myself insane because I couldn't get outside of there. I was going stir crazy, right? I couldn't drive out because the roads were all mud. And my car, even if it had clearance, I didn't want to risk it. So I went stir crazy for sure. Wow, smoking spiders? Absolutely. They were very chill, you know? Like, a lot of people are very afraid of black widow spiders, but they were very chill spiders. They never hurt me. They ended up killing those spiders because it was like a workplace safety hazard. I don't know. Like, everything on an oil rig is carcinogenic. Just breathing on an oil rig is carcinogenic. I don't think you had to get rid of the spiders, but who do I... You know, it's not my choice. That cool picnic table? Yeah. Yeah, poor spiders. It was very poor spiders. It was a nice family, right? There were a couple per corner, and they had their webs, and I was always watch them, right? They were very chill, right? They never hurt me. I can imagine if you stuck your hand in front of them, they might attack you. They might bite you. But black widow spiders are probably very calm. At least in my experience. Of course, oil rigs also had, like, rattlesnakes as the common ones. The vibration of the drilling platform itself would draw in rattlesnakes, right? So there were always rattlesnakes around as well. Very good times. I remember one time, I guess it was towards September, and it was tarantula season. Tarantula season sounds like this made-up thing, right? But I'm not even kidding. The entire desert floor was just covered in migrating tarantulas. Yeah. Absolutely. You would think it would drive them away, but no. Apparently it reminded them of struggling prey. So, the vibrating of the drilling platform probably reminded them of vibrating prey. Things like voles and, I don't know, anything kind of like rodent-like. They would burrow. Moles, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what rattlesnakes eat in the Permian Basin. I don't know. I hope tarantulas. I don't really think so. Anyway, this one time it was raining for a very long time, and everything was just clay around me. And I'd lost my sanity at that point, so I just sat down in the mud and started using the clay-rich soil to sculpt these figurines which I would just leave around the oil rig. Like, I've just randomly leave these sculpted figurines made out of mud. Like some kind of adult playing in the mud like a child. That's what I did, right? To occupy my time. Because I'd gone insane at that point. After months and months of just being isolated on an oil rig in that dangerous environment. Like, I want you to think about it. There are hundreds of ways to die on an oil rig per day. Heavy machinery, electrocution, hit by a car, pipes, connections, like, you name it. There are hundreds of ways to die on an oil rig. Some you can't even see, like H2S, hydrogen sulfide, poisonous gas that you can't smell, can't see, can't anything. And you just die. Kind of adorable. I'm glad you think so. It helped me keep my sanity, right? After months and months of vigilance, trying to keep up my awareness of worksite dangers, I had to be there. I had to keep vigilant. I had to make sure that I wasn't doing anything that would cause myself to potentially die. Not that I avoided that, right? I got very lucky. I'll be very honest, like, one of the kicks nearly took my head off. Whatever helps. Exactly. You gotta do what you gotta do when you're isolated like that. A lot of people underestimate the effects of isolation on the human mind. Not me. Not me. I know. I know better. I've been there. I don't know if I ever crawled back out of that abyss. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I ever crawled out of that abyss. But I'm back here now in civilization. And, yeah, I'm mostly human again, right? That's part of this whole streaming thing. I wanted to get some of that humanity after losing it for, I don't know, years upon years. I wanted that humanity back. Thank you. Less than 3, thank you. I'm fine now. I really must I really must say that I am fine now. Like, I was not fine back then. Back then, things were bad. I remember one time, because there were two of us, right? There were day shift and night shift. We both worked 12-hour shifts, and we were both living in a on-site trailer the entire time. We would take shifts, sleeping in the same trailer bed. Not uncommon. We one time turned our trailer into a mini golf course, right? So we turned our trailer into a mini golf course. We didn't have a putter. We didn't have a golf ball. We didn't have a hole. We made 2, right? We got these rubber bands and we turned them into a ball. We got a cup and we turned it onto its side and we turned it into a hole. We got a broom and we turned that into a putter. And we set up obstacles made out of books or whatever else we had. And whenever we didn't have anything else to do, and we were just trying not to go crazy, we would challenge each other to this game of mini-golf in the trailer. And every hole we would add a new obstacle, and whoever won. And that kept our sanity for a long time. It's the simple things when you're isolated in the middle of nowhere and you don't have access to the internet or movies or music or really anything, right? Like, no modern conveniences. Not even showers, not having running water. It gave me a new appreciation for people in other parts of the world who didn't have access to things like running water or heat or electricity stably. Because I didn't. I didn't necessarily even have access to a working stove 90% of the time. So cooking things was very difficult. A lot of meals ended up being microwave meals, right? Yeah, it's a great way to have fun. It's a great way to keep your sanity. The only way to keep your sanity. The pay was not worth it. I will tell you that. If you're considering a career in oil and gas, and you ever have the chance to work on site, I highly recommend thinking against that. There is very little that could convince me to get back on a rig, right? Like, it would have to be life or death necessity in order to get me back on an oil rig. And I highly recommend to anyone who's looking to get into the field. Oh, hiccups. Drinking, right? Anyone looking to get into the field, consider not doing that. My body wouldn't cooperate. Yeah, probably not. Physical abilities. You know, the physical abilities thing, right? Like, I have aside from some of the things I've talked about, a lot of people might think that I'm more... Oh, hiccups. I'm more urbane than I am, right? Hold on a second. Let me get a drink. These hiccups are gonna kill me. Okay. You know, when I was younger, my parents would tell me to say my middle name. Get rid of hiccups? I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that on stream. And I'm not gonna dox myself. Anyway. What was I talking about? Oh, right, the physical things. It is very physically demanding. The oil rigs are typically several flights of stairs, right? So to get to the platform, you have to go up these very steep stairs. And the rest of the rig is at least semi-steep stairs. Usually you're hauling like 50 pounds of machinery up and down rigs, up and down these stairs. And my job was pretty tame in comparison. I had to walk up and down the stairs, but I didn't have to carry too many heavy things, right? The heaviest thing I had to deal with was something called a magnet sample, right? So basically we had this 20-pound magnet, neodymium magnet, that we would hang in this piece of machinery that had all the drilling stuff coming up through it. The drilling mud, the rock shavings, the shoe casing, the drill bit. And this magnet would capture all the metal bits, right? And yeah, that was the heaviest part. When it was laden with metal and oil-based mud, that thing would weigh about 50 pounds. And you had to pull that up in an awkward position. And yeah, that was not fun. Scraping that clean, cleaning off the metal fragments, and saying, hey, you have approximately a pound of metal in your fragments, or in your drilling mud, for the last, I don't know, 12 hours. Quite a lot of metal. Like, you wouldn't think that. But, yeah. The drilling rig itself is a very interesting process. The connections are interesting. The drilling is interesting. Everything is a highly specialized process. Everything is very meticulous. And there are separations of, I guess, work that the divisions of labor were just very specialized. And it required a lot of communication. Like, that's the thing that got me, right? Like, I thought this work would be like, oh yeah, I'll report to one boss, and that'll be that. There's only one boss per rig site. No. Absolutely not, no. Rigs have essentially two bosses, right? They have a company man, the one who is working for the oil company that is doing the prospecting or the drilling. Places like Shell or whatever else. I'm not going to give the names I gave, or the names that I worked with. So I did not work with Shell. But you know what I mean. Like oil companies like that. And then the other one is the tool pusher or the foreman. And the tool pusher is basically the owner of the rig. So the company man doesn't actually own the rig. They're working for a company, and the tool pusher owns the rig. They own the rig and the crew. You can't own a crew, but they hire the crew, they look out for the crew. So you have two different bosses, the company and the rig. And then you have independent contractors, and well, they can do whatever they want most of the time. They get a bad rap a lot of the time. But yeah, you have independent contractors. And I had to also report to the mud engineer. The mud engineer is basically the pit boss, but independent. So the pit boss is something completely different, but they do the same job. It's fascinating. They basically run the rig machinery, whereas the mud engineer is they're doing math, trying to calculate what kind of additives to add to the drilling mud to make sure that the density of the mud is high enough to bring up the rock shavings and to suppress kicks or rapid releases of gas or oil through the rig, the drilling pipes, right? Yeah. So they had to suppress that and make sure everything was stable while they were drilling. And also lubricated, right? The drilling mud is essential for lubrication. You don't want to have anything sparking or anything like that, right? Yeah. So I had to report to 3 different people every single day. It was not great. It really wasn't. I probably had the most bosses on the rig out of anyone because of my job. So I really don't talk about it too much because it's a lot of a downer stuff, right? It's very much a downer topic. To talk about these black company conditions and all of these very interesting things where I went insane, right? I don't regret it. Like, I want to make that perfectly clear. I very much enjoyed the work. I did not enjoy the company. I hated the company. And a lot of the choices the company made just did not make sense to me. Very interesting as well. I'm glad you think so. I think the work is very interesting. As far as I'm concerned, right? There's very little that I could have done with my degree that would have been as fulfilling, right? It was different every single day, right? Because you have to drill through different formations, you have to identify them, you have to identify the rock, you have to know where you're going underground, which is fascinating, right? That you're picking up these fragments and you're saying, yeah, we're going through this formation or we're going through that formation. We have this kind of rock that we're going through. You've hit a layer of chert. Your drill bit is turned into Swiss cheese, right? Turn back, head up, stop drilling, slow down, whatever. That kind of stuff. It was different every single day, every single rig, every single time. And usually, when it was going slow enough, say about 100 miles per hour, I was happy enough to do the job. I wasn't tiring myself too much. But when we hit 250 miles per hour, and yeah, that's when I started burning myself out. Especially when I had to train newbies, right? Like, I don't fault them. Newbies don't know what you're doing, right? Like, there's this thing in the oil rigs. They get these green hard hats, right? They're short term employees or something. I can't remember the name. Basically, 90 days. It takes 90 days for a green hat to graduate from being a newbie on the oil rigs and knowing what they're actually doing. And I started training those towards the end of my Permian Basin career, and I thought to myself, no, no, I don't want to be responsible for these people. And that was it. That was my this is it moment. I'm done. I can't stand it anymore. I've been isolated for 8 months. Now you've got me training these newbies. No thank you. No thank you to the 24-hour shifts every day for 2 weeks. No thank you. So yeah, I'm glad you find it interesting. but there have been reasons why I have not talked about this very interesting job, which I agree was very interesting. Ah, yes, it does. It ties into a lot of conversations. I have very mixed feelings about the job itself. I enjoyed the work. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely enjoyed the work. Um, if we were drilling for like water wells, and I had to do the same things that I did for the oil wells, I don't think it would have been that bad. We wouldn't have been using oil-based mud, I can tell you that. So there are two types of drilling mud on an oil rig, right? There's water-based mud, and then there's oil-based mud. Oil-based mud has a higher density. It can hold higher density materials, and it can bring higher density materials up to the surface. Water-based mud is basically salt water with different kind of metal salts in it. So you can get varying densities as well, depending on the metal salt that you add to it. But oil-based mud is universally carcinogenic, as are many things on the oil rigs, and it does not wash out of anything. I remember when I finished that job, no matter how many times I showered, I would smell like diesel fuel. For weeks and weeks and months, no matter how many times I showered, no matter how long ago it was that I got off the rigs, I would just smell like diesel fuel. Like it just seeped into my being. That was another thing that drove me insane, right? Like all the different solvents and the diesel fuel. Diesel fuel ended up being one of those solvents that would use for the magnet samples, for example, right? We used diesel fuel to cut the oil-based mud to make sure that that was off all of the metal fragments that we pulled off the magnet samples every day. Yeah, very nice stuff. Oh, I loved it. We had other solvents, of course. Things like rubbing alcohol worked pretty well. Yeah, I enjoyed using lighter fluid. Lighter fluid was a great solvent. Whenever I needed lighter fluid for my Zippos, because of course I use Zippos. Everyone on a rig would use Zippos. Why not? They're cool. They have that characteristic click. I would just tap into the company supply and fill up my lighter, right? Yeah. Which is great, right? Of course, from time to time I would end up using my own lighter fluid as solvent when we ran out, so it evened itself out, right? I don't want to say I stole from the company, because I didn't. I didn't. It evened itself out, right? I gave back as much as I took. I guarantee it. I might have even given more, right? And they took advantage of me, so it doesn't really matter. They took great advantage of me. Yeah. But yeah. Pretty much everything on the oil rigs was carcinogenic. Everything from the lubricants we used for the machineries to the solvents we used for the machineries. It was all carcinogenic. And everything that we brought up from the subsurface as well was carcinogenic. It was a good time. It's definitely a younger man's game. Like, I don't think I could do it as an old man. But there were old people that were working well into their 60s on the oil rigs, which was shocking to me, right? Like, this 60-year-old man would just be, like, working on this oil rig with all these expectations. Oh, it was awful. Up and down these stairs that were, like, a flight and a half. And they're not, like... They weren't gentle steps, either. They were very steep. You'd have to go up and down every, like, I don't know, 10 minutes. It was very ridiculous to see this old 65-year-old man doing it. But, you know, more power to them. I'm sure it kept him fit as a fiddle, right? I wouldn't be surprised if, despite all the carcinogens, that particular man that I'm thinking of lived to be 110, right? Yeah, that's how I feel. Anyway, I had a great time, but we're gonna end it here, you know? Yeah. Physically, at least. Mentally, you know the strangest part? Mentally, I think he was doing really well, right? Because he was married. It wasn't unusual to see people married on the oil rigs, but I'll tell you what, it was a lot more common to see them divorced on the oil rigs. I don't know how many divorces I saw while working in that 8-month stretch in the Permian Basin. It had to be at least 5. 5 different, new divorces. I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, he's been divorced for a year. No, no. I'm talking about, oh yeah, I'm getting divorced. Or, oh yeah, I got divorced last week. That kind of divorce. You know? But the guy I'm thinking about, physically, strong as an ox. Mentally, he was still married after all that time, despite being away from his wife. Well, maybe because he was away from his wife, I don't know. I don't know how that relationship worked. I'm not gonna judge. There were all kinds of relationships on those rigs. And I'm not gonna judge any of them. I will say it was very interesting to see, right? The differences in all of those kind of things. It was eye-opening after college, right? So this is how the world actually works, you know? That kind of thing. Very strange to me. Anyway, I had a lot of fun. Yeah, I talked about things that I probably shouldn't have talked about. And, everything willing, maybe I won't talk about ever again. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you had fun. I did. But for now, I will see you again next time. I love you all. Good night. But for now, wrong one. Hide out. Good night. See you again next time.